All right, so who did we talk about last week? Who are we continuing on? Gideon. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Judges chapter. We'll probably be in chapter 8. We'll be in 6 through 8. We'll kind of pop around a little bit, but go ahead and just have your Bibles ready there because we're going to continue our talk on Gideon. And as I mentioned last week, we were talking about, you can kind of break up Gideon's life into kind of 3 stages, kind of 3 parts of his life. And the chapters kind of coincide with that, the 3 chapters that kind of talk about him. We have chapter number 6 that kind of deals with his period of questioning, his period of struggle with what God would have for him to do and how to do that. The second section, chapter number 7, the second portion of his life, deals with the time of obedience. This is the time that he has put aside his questioning. He has put aside his. I'm not saying he's assuaged his doubts completely, because we talked about in 7 that God still gave him some. All right, I know you don't quite understand, so go on down and listen to what they're going to talk about. You'll understand how I'm going to defeat them. But he was ready. He was ready to move on, and he was not going to be a man of inaction. It was time to be a man of action, and that's what chapter number 7 talks about. His time of obedience. And then we'll get in today a little bit more, chapter number 8, which deals with his time of forgetting God. And this is the sad conclusion to Gideon's life. And we'll talk about that through this. But I wanted to go back and just do a quick review, a little bit of more information, and a little bit of clarity. We mentioned this last week, but I just kind of want to clarify and go over a few things real quick. So first, we spent most of our lesson last week talking about this idea of questioning or asking questions of God. Now, I do want to clarify that. I don't want to continue to try to use the phrase questioning God, because that can imply some negative connotations. But a better way of putting that would be asking questions of God, or wrestling with information and questions with God. And I wanted to clarify something that it kind of set with me all week as I was rereading all of this, something that Chance mentioned last week. From some of y'all may not have heard him, some of you may have, that he mentioned when we were talking about this. And that is, when I say that we're asking questions of God and that is okay, and in fact it is a positive thing because it leads to coming to a better understanding of who God is, we're not asking, the clarifying statement here is we need to make sure that we understand that we're not questioning who God is, but we are questioning how. We're questioning why. So I want to talk about that a little bit here. When you look at Gideon and you look at him asking his questions, if you go back to chapter number 6, you can see, in fact, let's just do that real quick. If you look back in chapter number 6, look at some of his questions. Sorry. Let's see. And it came to pass when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, verse number 7, because of Midianites. The Lord sent a prophet. Oh, wait, got to go past the prophet. We got to get to Gideon. And there came, verse 11, and there came an angel of the Lord and sat under an oak tree, which was in Ophrah, that pertained to Joash the Abiezrite. Yep. And his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, and he said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all of his miracles which our fathers told of us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. This on its surface can seem very harsh. But what do we not see Gideon doing? Anybody? Blaming God. We don't see him blaming God. He's not, say what? He's not avoiding God. He's not questioning if the miracles happened. He's not saying, I don't believe that you did these things. He's in fact saying, I know that you did these things. Where's ours? So when it comes to questioning, when it comes to asking questions of God, and it comes to wrestling things with God, it's not about It's about understanding we know who God is and we know what God is capable of, and it's more of a question of how can I understand that more? How can I get more of that? We're not questioning who God is. We're questioning how can I understand God more? And this is what leads to obedience. Questioning God, who He is Himself. Questioning His power, His authority, His holiness, His righteousness. Not believing that is God. That is unbelief. That is a sin. We are now questioning the very nature of God. We are not believing who God is. We are not children of God. We don't have that inside of us. This is a sin. That is disbelief. That is unbelief. But questioning, how can I understand God more? How can I get to a point where I am ready to obey? How can I learn more about you, God? How can I understand you more? And in this particular case, Gideon's saying, how can I do that? I know that you are capable, God, but how can I do that through your power? And so that's an interesting thing that we need to distinguish. And we see this a lot. We see this a lot with, take our questioning of Moses. He wasn't saying that God couldn't deliver the children of Israel. He was just saying, I don't think I can. I don't think I can. Why me? Why are you using me to do this? Not that, God, I don't think you're capable of this. It is, why are you using me? And this comes up quite a lot. So there's one of my favorite examples I read this week. So I read through quite a bit of this because it was an interesting subtopic to me. Is if it's a little known book in the Bible that many people don't read very much, but we're going to read just a little bit of it today because I really want to emphasize this point today, and that's Habakkuk. Habakkuk. So you just kind of turn a little past the middle of your Bible. It's a little short 3-chapter. This is one of our minor prophets, and I think this is a very good example of being able to question God without questioning who God is. So, Habakkuk is set in a very terrible time for the children of Israel. He is a prophet, and he will distinguish himself as a prophet sent not as a prophet of deliverance, but more as a prophet of doom. He has a message that isn't exactly positive. And so he struggles with this. He struggles with the idea of having to be a messenger of not the best of news to the children of Israel. So let's just read chapter 1 just for a little bit. And then I want to jump ahead and we'll get something. We'll get where Habakkuk comes to. Chapter 1 says, the burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see. That's a good start, right? O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear, even cry out unto the violence, and thou wilt not save? Why dost thou show me iniquity, and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are that raise up strife and contention. So he's starting with, why do I have to be this? Why do I have to be the prophet that sees this? That sees this terrible things that are coming before me, to see this iniquity that is before me, the violence that is around me. And then he goes on and describes the punishment that God is giving in the next few verses. Behold, verse 5 says, behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvelously. For I work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told you. For lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land and possess the dwelling place that are theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall precede themselves. So he goes on for a few verses and talks about the terrible punishment that God is giving to the children of Israel through the Chaldeans that he must witness and be a witness of. But later in chapter number 1, he comes around to his understanding. After he's questioned God, why do I have to do this? And then he gets his answer, or he says his own answer in verse 11 and 12. Then shall his mind change, and he shall pass over and offend, imputing this his power unto his God. And verse 12 says, art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God, mine Holy One? We shall not die, O Lord. Thou hast ordained them for judgment, and O mighty God, thou hast established them for correction. Thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil. Thou canst not look on iniquity, and wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and hold thy tongue, which the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he. So he comes in verse 12 to understand, I know I'm having to do this, but God, it's because you are righteous. You are the Holy One. We're not going to die. You've promised us a promise. I believe you, God, and you're doing this because you have ordained them for judgment. This is how it's supposed to be. I don't understand it, God. Habakkuk's telling God, I don't understand it. I don't know why I have to be this prophet. But he comes to the conclusion that even though he has to be this prophet, it's a good thing because it's what God has ordained. And it's a difficult thing. So he doesn't question who God is. He doesn't question his righteousness or his mercy or his power or any of those things. He does question, why me? Why do I have to go through that? And eventually he gets his answer. He gets his answer. It's because it's for his honor and glory. It's because God ordained it to be so. And so this was a wonderful, if you get a chance, read Habakkuk. It seems a little on the low side, seems a little harsh, but you see moments that Habakkuk gets to understand that this is all for the honor and glory of God. Even though he can't understand it, he doesn't know why, but it is all for the honor and glory of God. So I wanted to mention that this morning before we really got back into Gideon, is this idea of questioning God or asking questions of God and dealing with things that God has told us to do without actually questioning who he is as our God, as our Savior, as our Creator, as the omnipotent, omniscient God. We do have one instance that I can think of, and probably some more if y'all take a moment here and think. What is an instance when someone questioned who God is? Not just why, but questioned who God is, questioned his authority. Anybody? What was the very first question asked recorded in the Bible? Did God really say? This is coming from what? The serpent, from Satan. His question isn't, is God going to do that for you? He questioned the very holiness of God. He questioned the very truthfulness of God, the very nature of who God is. Did God really say that? He questioned who God. He wasn't questioning God. He wasn't asking Eve to question or deal with these things of why can't I eat that? God, I would like to eat it, but I know that you are holy and it was your choice. No, he said, God really didn't say that. Really. He questioned God's holiness. He questions God's truthfulness. That was one I came up with. Anybody else got an example? Couldn't think of another. Joe? Go ahead. What was some of his... What was some of the things he was dealing with? Whoever said that. Okay. Give me a little clarity.
Well, I think Job is a good example of, I'm going to trust God in spite of my circumstance.
Sure.
But there does come a time after Job's friends have beat on him pretty good where God kind of has to bump Job.
Yeah.
And say, are you there when I laid the foundations for the world? No. Are you the one who can do these things? You are not.
Yeah. And so Job was questioning his holiness and his goodness, and God had to come and show him, yes, I am still these things despite your circumstances, despite the things that I have allowed in your life. I am still the same God. I just thought this was a very interesting thought. So read what I will give you as a mission, since we're having Mission Sunday next week. We won't be in Judges. Read Habakkuk. It's 3 chapters. Won't take you very long. And just read through that and think about the idea of questioning God, but yet still seeing His ultimate plan and His ultimate victory. So this is what we are to do. This is where we're leaving off. This is where we're going to pick up where Gideon was. He had questioned God. He then fought. He then obeyed God after he got through that, after God had showed him all of his answers to all of his questions. Then he was victorious. He was a mighty man of valor, as God had told him, and he was ready for the spoils of his victory. He had been obedient, and now it was time for the spoils of the victory. Well, not quite. And this is, my friends, unfortunately, is where we leave off with the good stuff. We have to now deal with the negative things that happened in Gideon's life. All good things must come to an end. And that's where we pick up in chapter number 8. So, technically, for the first half of chapter number 8, we're finishing the battle, but it's not really the whole battle. We are Gideon is chasing after two of the princes of the battle. They had fled. Chapter number 7 says that some fled and some fought among themselves and killed themselves. And so Gideon is chasing after the ones that fled. Two princes. I'm not going to even try to pronounce their names. They start with Z's. But there you go. So two princes are running, and Gideon and his 300 men are chasing after them. Well, they go through two cities in this chase, and both times Gideon asks for them to take care of his men, to feed them, to shelter them, to let them rest. And both times the cities are still more afraid of the Midianites. They question, do you have those? Well, if you don't got them in your hands yet, they could still come back against us. And so they refuse to help. And both times Gideon curses the cities and promises retribution on those cities. So that's what the first part of chapter number 8 is. Eventually he catches up with the two princes, captures them, goes back, and one of the cities he destroys, and the other one he takes their leaders out and flogs them publicly for their disobedience against not allowing his men and being more fearful of the Midianites. So that's where we pick up. We're going to pick up where he has the two princes captured. And he is ready to do what God has said. He has destroyed their men. He has destroyed their armies. Which, little aside note here, we're still talking 15,000 men. And Gideon still has his 300. This is still a pretty big deal that Gideon and his 300 men catch up with these 15,000 or 12,000. And either way, and kills them and destroys these armies. And it doesn't say that Gideon's losses were great or anything like that. It just says he destroyed these armies. So this is, again, another example of God taking care of Gideon and protecting him and taking care of his men and helping him have this victory. Well, he then begins to question these two princes. I got to turn back to Judges. I have been in Habakkuk. Good job, me. Judges chapter number 8. He begins to question these two men. Okay, so verse number 17 says, and he beat down the tower of Peniel and slew the men of the city. This is where he killed those men that questioned or would not help his cause. Verse number 18 says, then said he unto Zebah and Zalmunna, what manner of men are they whom ye slew in Tabor? And they answered, as thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the children of a king. And he said, they were my brethren, even the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if ye had saved them alive, I would not slay you. So he asked of these two princes who he killed in Tabor. Who he killed in Tabor. And they answer, they looked an awful lot like you. they seemed a lot like you. And Gideon says, well, they were my family. They were my kin. And then he says, if you wouldn't have killed them, I would spare you. And this is the first little chink in Gideon's armor since he was obedient. This is the first little chink in the armor that we see that Gideon is beginning to kind of forget what God had told him to do. Part of God's plan for the Midianites was for their army to be utterly destroyed, for them to be thrown down at the hand of Gideon. And here, Gideon is wanting to spare these two princes' lives. He is wanting to not utterly destroy them. In fact, he's trying to find ways not to utterly destroy them. He's saying, did you save any of these guys alive? Did you protect any of my kin? And of course, they said no. They utterly killed his kin, and he moved on. And then, verse number 19 says, and he said, they were my brethren. and I would have not slayed you. And then verse 20 says, and he said unto Jether, his firstborn, up and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was a youth. Now he's trying to pass it on to his son to do the job that he was supposed to do. This was Gideon's job to kill the men of Midian, to destroy these two princes. And he tells his firstborn son, who was apparently still pretty young, to draw the sword and do it instead. And I find this next part even a little bit interesting. Verse 21 says, and Zebah and Zalmunna, the two princes that were about to be killed, said, arise thou and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. Basically said, if you're going to be man enough to kill us, do it yourself. And they even understood this was Gideon's job, and he was trying to find any way not to kill these princes. He asked his son to do it, whom was not ready to do it. It was not his responsibility. It was Gideon's responsibility to do this. And so he began to forget the things that God had told him to do and try to do things under his own strength, try to do things his own way. And maybe he was trying to bring his son up strong and big, but he wasn't ready for it yet. Even the other men could see he wasn't ready for it yet. So eventually Gideon does draw a sword and kill the two princes, and he took their ornaments and took all of their spoils of victory. So this is the first kind of moment we see that maybe Gideon is forgetting some of the things that God has taught him just so soon. He is trying to do things a little bit more in his own way, and he is trying to do things in his own power. And this immediately leads to the first problem. Now, Gideon handles this problem well, but it starts to get things going in his mind and start to get things questioning. So, once he has killed off these men, he has chased them down, and he has hunted them down, and he has killed them. What is the first thing that the people of Israel want to do? Crown Gideon as ruler. So what was the reason, all the way back in chapter number 7, that God gave for wanting to bring down the number of Israelites, or the army, to go fight? What was his reasoning? Exactly. So they couldn't say it was themselves that did it. So Gideon wouldn't get the glory. So the children of Israel wouldn't boast that, hey, look what we did. Look what we were able to accomplish. And the first thing they do, even with 300 men killing this army off, is go, Gideon, good job, bud. You did a great job. Why don't you and your descendants be our ruler? At this time, did Israel have a king? No, they didn't have a king. God didn't want them to have a king. God hadn't established the kings yet. He had judges to help rule over them, but he didn't establish the king yet. God was their ruler. Everything went through God. And the very first thing they do is they say, Gideon, you be our ruler. You did a great job. You led those 300 men. That was a great victory by you. Now, Gideon does a good job here. His words are fantastic, and he answers them correctly. Verse 22 says, Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son, and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. Thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. The people have already forgot who God is. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. So his words are fantastic. He answers them correctly. I'm not going to rule over you. My sons aren't going to rule over you. God is going to rule over you. Yahweh is going to rule over you. But then his actions don't exactly line up with his words. Verse 24, And Gideon said unto them, I would desire a request of you, that you would give me every man his earrings of his prey, for they had gold earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, We will willingly give them. And they spread a garment, and did cast therein every man the earrings of his prey. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside ornaments and collars and purple raiment that was upon the kings of Midian, beside the chains that were about the camel's neck. So he says, I'm not going to rule over you, but I do have a request of you. Bring me your gold. Bring me all the spoils of victory that we just had. And he's going to turn around and he's going to do something with it. What is this? Does anybody else think of another story that this kind of brings to mind?
Aaron.
Say what? Aaron? Yes, absolutely. For those who don't know, Aaron, when Moses went up onto the mount to hear from God, to get the 10 Commandments and be with God, immediately Aaron asked everyone for their gold earrings. And what did he end up doing with those? Made a golden calf, made an idol, an altar that they could then worship while Moses was up on the mountain getting a direct word from God. They forgot God that quickly and began to make an altar with a golden calf. Well, good thing is here, Gideon's better than that. He's not going to make a golden calf that they sit down and worship. Don't worry, he's better than that, people. Let's see what he does with it. Verse 27, and Gideon made an ephod thereof. Oh man, I was wrong. And put it in the city, even in Ophrah, which we learned in chapter number 6 was his hometown. And all Israel went thither and whoring after it, which things became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. So what he makes, he doesn't make a golden calf, people. He's much better than that. He decides to make an ephod and put it in his hometown so everyone else would come and see it, come to him and see it. What is an ephod? Anybody know what an ephod is? In context, ephod changed because of stories like this, the meaning of ephod changed. Originally, what is an ephod? It is the breastplate that the high priest wore when he went in to perform his priestly duties. It was, they would say, a conduit to which God would light upon the high priest so that he could have connection with God in the Holy of Holy place. It was a very ornate. I won't go into all the details. It had stones on it and had ribbons and all different things coming off of it. But it was a symbol to the children of Israel of God's holiness that the high priest would put on as part of his garment to perform his priestly duties. It was a place that people would see it in the holy place, in the place where they would go to sacrifice to their God. When they would go to the tabernacle to sacrifice, the high priest would be wearing this ephod. And so I don't think he made a exact replica because this is a huge amount of gold and things. But probably what he did is he made an homage to that. He probably made an example of that, maybe even a bigger version of it. And instead of the high priest wearing it like God had commanded him to do, he decided to stick it in his neighborhood so everyone would have to come to him and see it. And it tells us that the children of Israel did exactly that. Their phrase was, the King James Version phrase is, they came a whoring after that. They sought it instead of seeking after God. Instead of, God had said, this ephod's where you come at the tabernacle to sacrifice under my law that I have established for you because I am holy. And Gideon said, that's great, and I appreciate that. Here's another example of it. And he put himself up by putting it in his own hometown where they would come after it, that he would be the focus of what the children of Israel would worship. And it was now he made his hometown and his place the center of that. And it became, as the end of that verse says, and it became a snare unto Gideon and his house. This was a problem for Gideon. This was a problem for the children of Israel. This was setting up an idol, well-intended idol. I don't know that Gideon even particularly wanted the worship. He had the opportunity just a few verses before to set himself up as king. But he allowed himself to forget the rules of God. He allowed himself to compromise what God had told him to do. Now, did God, because he was a good Israel, he understood, he had been told, chapter number 6 tells us that he had been told all about the miracles that God had performed. This prophet had came and mentioned all these things that God had done. And he allowed himself to forget those things, to forget the way of God, and allow himself to set himself up as an alternate to that. What are some things sometimes in our lives that may be well-intended, but sometimes can pull away from God and pull towards ourselves and our own thoughts? Anybody? Legacy. What do you mean? Where are we going with that?
What they're doing here, Gideon says, I'm not going to be your king, but bring me your gold and I'll make this remembrance.
Yeah.
Put up this statue as a memorial of what we've done together.
I don't want to be forgotten particularly, and I don't want you to forget what's going on. But yeah, he's and it's a well-intended thing. He wants his family to have, and he wants the children of Israel to remember what God had done that day. But he put it more, forgot about who God was, and forgot about the reason God did this in the first place was so that they didn't have to, so that they wouldn't think it was under their own power. Anybody else?
It just goes to show that even sometimes well-intentions, you could read this passage and think, well, he probably had good intentions here.
Yeah.
But our good intentions are a pittance before we do it.
Yeah.
We have to be careful with our decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can, what is it? The Bible describes it as our righteousness is filthy rags. The best we can do is nothing compared to what God would have us to actually, or have as the plan. I think about sometimes our well-intentioned things that can pull us away from God is family, is work, or work even in the church. Things that you are doing in the church that you say, look, what I'm doing this thing for you, God. But you neglect your personal relationship with God for it. Or you neglect your family for it. Or you neglect what God would actually have you be doing. You're busy. You're doing good things with good intentions. But we lose sight of why we are doing these things in the first place. Why we are here in the first place. We lose that. And so our good intentions sometimes can cause us to set ourselves up as the reason that we're celebrating. Again, it's real easy to say, look what I did after you've been working so hard to do something in your own power. Anybody else? No? All right. Better than I am. That's great. I appreciate you guys. No, but so this is where Gideon began to forget God. So after this, he sets this up. It becomes a snare into his family. And then he just keeps going down that path. The rest of this chapter kind of tells us the rest of Gideon's story, and it's not a particularly beautiful one. Verse 28 says, "Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more, and the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon." God still blessed, even through this last little struggle in Gideon's life. He still blessed and gave them 40 years of peace while Gideon lived. And Gideon had 70 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bare him a son, whose name was called Abimelech. That name will come up again later. But so he then goes into the pagan idea, and he has many wives and concubines, and he begins to, I think probably, the Bible doesn't tell us this, but I believe probably he had some of this went to his head about the things that he was doing. I deserve these wives. I deserve these concubines. I have earned these things amongst my people. And he doesn't tell us why, but he took many wives and concubines. And he died a good old age and was buried at the sepulchre of Joash, his father, and Ophrah of the Abezerites. Then verse 33 kind of tells us the very sad end to this story. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Balaam, and made Baalereth their god. How did this story start in chapter number 6? Gideon asked his questions. He worked through it with God. The first thing the messenger told Gideon to do was what? Go tear down the altars of Baal. Go utterly destroy the grove. Don't just tear down the altar, destroy the whole area. Take it all down. Now, he was scared to do so. He went through in the night, but he did that and he erected an altar to God and did a burnt sacrifice on the altar to God during that night. That was the very first thing that God told him to do, was to destroy the altars of Baal. And we see here, it says immediately after he died, that the children of Israel went back to worshiping Baal. My guess is that altar that was sitting in that grove must have been there for a special place for Baal, for whatever reason. My guess is the Israelites immediately just went and took down the altar to God, put back up the statues of Baal, redid everything. But why did the children of Israel do that immediately? They did it immediately because Gideon had forgotten who God was at the end of his life. He had forgotten. He wasn't still continually telling the people about God. He wasn't continuing to build up the relationship closer to God. He had questioned God. He had gotten his answers. He had, through faith, and I can prove through faith, that he then fought the Midianites, utterly destroyed them, gave his people 40 years of peace. But no one remembered God after that. And as I said, we can prove that he did all this in faith, because in Hebrews chapter number 11, we get an account of faith. A lot of people call it the Hall of Faith instead of the Hall of Fame. It is just a list of all these wonderful things that God had done in faith through these people. And he says, I don't have time to talk about all of these people, like Gideon. And he mentions Gideon's name in Hebrews chapter 11 as a man of faith, a man who accomplished things through faith. And that is what he did. He did have the faith in God, and he did, through faith, do these things. But I want to challenge us as hopefully people of faith in this room this morning. And if you're not, this is a perfect opportunity to be. But as people of faith, I would like to challenge us to continue in the faith, continue in the fight, continue to question and wrestle with things of God so that you can continue to act in faith, and that you can pass on this faith and pass on this obedience that Gideon had earlier in his life. He said he lived to a good old age. He lived at least another 40 years because God gave him 40 years of peace during that time. And so this is what I would challenge us through the story of Gideon. It is a story about wrestling with God in obedience to Him. But then in the end, it is a warning about not following through with that faith. Being continuous in that faith. Not giving up, not sitting on your laurels. Look what I did, God. Look what you have done through me. But God has so much more to accomplish through us. He would like for us to continue this story through it. And so that's what I would have for us to get from Gideon today. I hope that was something that is meaningful to you, and I pray that you would just take that and help and pray to God that you would continue working your faith, continue challenging your faith, continue practicing your faith and obedience. Anybody got any comments or questions?